Imagine the sound of keys turning in locks so thick they could swallow a grown man. Imagine walls built with the blood of slaughtered oxen, 15 feet of limestone and iron, that have watched 9 centuries of England's darkest secrets unfold in their shadow. Imagine a place where 2 children walked up stone steps as future kings and simply vanished. The Tower of London. Built for the equivalent of $200 million in today's money, it was sold to the world as England's greatest fortress. But the records tell a different story. The real story. Between 1066 and 1600, over 8 Vosroudan people entered those gates. Less than half ever walked out alive. The rest became entries in ledgers that were systematically destroyed, their names erased, their bodies dissolved into London clay as if they had never existed. This wasn't a prison. This was a machine. A machine designed by Norman engineers to solve a very specific problem. How do you make inconvenient people disappear so completely that even their memory becomes dangerous to possess? Tonight we're opening the files that survived. We're following the money, the blueprints, the maintenance records, the confession transcripts that were supposed to burn but didn't. We're conducting a forensic audit of England's most successful murder factory, stone by stone, victim by victim, lie by lie, because the Tower of London's greatest crime wasn't what it did to its prisoners. It was what it taught the world about the administrative science of making human beings vanish. If you're ready to discover how a building became a blueprint for systematic disappearance, hit that subscribe button. Join our community of historical investigators as we uncover the cold engineering behind England's darkest monument. The tower kept its secrets for 900 years. Tonight, those secrets start talking back. The Thames moves like black oil through London tonight. 500 years of secrets flow beneath these waters, and on the north bank, where the river bends toward the sea, stands a fortress that was never meant to protect England from her enemies. It was built to protect England from herself. The Tower of London. Stone by stone, it rose from the mud of conquest, and stone by stone, it became something far more dangerous than any medieval castle. It became a machine for making people disappear. But every machine has blueprints. Every blueprint has flaws. And every flaw, when pressure is applied, becomes a crack that splits foundations and topples kingdoms. This is the story of that crack. We begin in darkness, with water, and with a question that echoes through 9 centuries of English stone. What kind of government builds a fortress inside its own capital, aimed not at foreign shores, but at the beds where its own citizens sleep? The river knows. The river has always known, and tonight the river is going to tell us. The year is 1066, and England has a new management structure. William of Normandy didn't just defeat Harold Godwinson at Hastings. He inherited a problem that every conqueror faces. How do you hold a country that doesn't want to be held? The answer, as it turns out, is limestone. 15,000 tons of it, quarried from the chalk cliffs of Caen and ferried across the channel in Norman ships. Each block weighs as much as a small horse. Each ship can carry perhaps 20 blocks before the hull sits too low in the water. Do the mathematics. 750 shiploads of stone crossing the English Channel in vessels that pray to reach port before the next storm. But William isn't thinking about storms. He's thinking about London. London in 1066 is a city of 30,000 souls, built where the Thames narrows to its first fordable point inland from the sea. It's a natural choke point. Every road from the continent funnels through London. Every ship that wants to trade with England's interior must pass London's docks. Control London, and you control the kingdom's throat. The Romans knew this. They built their first fortifications here 8 centuries before William arrived, but the Romans built walls to keep barbarians out. William has a different problem. The barbarians are already inside. They're English. They're everywhere. And they remember what England felt like before Norman boots began marching across their fields. So William builds something the Romans never imagined. He builds a fortress designed to face inward. The site he chooses sits at the city's eastern edge, where the old Roman wall crumbles into the Thames. It's high ground, 40 feet above the river, with clear sight lines in every direction. More importantly, it's inside the city walls. Inside, where English merchants count their profits and English craftsmen tend their fires, and English mothers sing English lullabies to English children who will grow up speaking French to their Norman lords. The message is carved in stone before the first foundation is laid. This is what happens to kingdoms that resist. We don't just take your crown, we move into your house. Construction begins in 1078. The workforce is English, conscripted under Norman supervision. They dig the foundation trenches by hand, hauling clay and gravel in wicker baskets. They mix mortar from burnt limestone and Thames River sand. They shape each block with iron chisels that spark against the stone in the dawn light. A percussion section, announcing the birth of something new and terrible in the heart of London. The master masons are Norman, imported from Caen with the stone. They carry plans drawn on parchment, architectural secrets learned in the castle-building workshops of Normandy. But the plans they're following aren't just blueprints for a building. They're blueprints for a new kind of power. Medieval castles are traditionally built on hilltops or cliff tops, places where geography provides the first line of defense. The tower rises from flat ground. Surrounded by the city, it's meant to intimidate. Its strength doesn't come from location. It comes from thickness. The walls of the central keep, the White Tower, are 15 feet thick at the base, 15 feet of solid stone, thick enough to swallow a small house. The windows are narrow slits, barely wide enough for an archer's bow. The doorway is on the second floor, accessible only by wooden stairs that can be pulled up in minutes, leaving visitors stranded 40 feet above the ground with no way down but gravity. This isn't architecture. This is weaponized geometry. Inside, the White Tower is a maze of rooms connected by spiral staircases that turn clockwise as you ascend. The turning is deliberate. A right-handed swordsman climbing the stairs fights at a disadvantage, his sword arm cramped against the central pillar. A defender at the top, fighting downward, has room to swing. Every step is calculated. Every angle serves the architecture of control. The Chapel of St. John sits at the White Tower's heart, a Norman masterpiece of rounded arches and thick pillars. It's one of the most beautiful rooms in medieval England, and it's 30 feet underground, surrounded by stone walls thick enough to muffle any sound that might try to escape. Beauty and brutality, worship and confinement, sharing the same foundation. This is Norman innovation. The mortar between the stones is mixed with ox blood. The ox blood makes it stronger, harder, more resistant to weather and time. It also turns the mortar a dark red that will fade to brown over the centuries, but never entirely disappear. The Tower of London is literally built with blood, not metaphorically, literally. 15,000 tons of stone held together with the blood of slaughtered animals, as if William wanted to make sure that even the chemistry of the building reminded London what happened to things that resist Norman rule. By 1100, 22 years after construction began, the White Tower stands complete. It's the tallest building in London, visible from every approach to the city. It's also the strongest, designed to survive not just military siege but the slower siege of centuries. The Norman architects built it to last 1,000 years. They succeeded. It's still there. It's still watching. But in 1100, as English craftsmen lay down their tools and look up at what their hands have built, the true innovation of the tower isn't its strength or its size. It's its function. Other castles are built to keep enemies out. The tower is built to keep people in. The first prisoner arrives before the mortar is fully dry. Ranulph Flambard, Bishop of Durham, enters through the tower's single door in the winter of 1100, charged with the medieval equivalent of tax evasion. He's not a murderer or a traitor or a foreign spy. He's a clergyman who collected too much money too efficiently for King Henry's comfort. His crime is competence that made the crown nervous. Flambard is given a room on the White Tower's second floor, furnished with a bed, a writing desk, and a window that looks out over the Thames. His meals are cooked in the tower's kitchens and served on silver plates. He's allowed books, writing materials, and visits from approved friends. By medieval standards, it's luxury accommodation. It's also a cage. The window in Flambard's room is 18 inches wide and 4 feet tall, cut through 15 feet of solid stone. The view is spectacular. The escape route is impossible. The door to his room is oak reinforced with iron, locked from the outside with a key that hangs on a chain around his guard's neck. The guard sleeps in the corridor outside, close enough to hear if Flambard so much as turns over in his bed. This is the tower's first innovation in the science of custody, comfort as control. Flambard isn't suffering in a dungeon. He's living in a stone apartment that happens to have locks on the outside of the door. It's almost civilized, almost humane, almost like freedom. Almost. The psychology is deliberate. Traditional dungeons break men's bodies and leave their spirits intact. The tower breaks something more subtle, the prisoner's sense of agency. Flambard can read, write, pray, think, plan. Remember, he can do everything except the one thing that defines freedom: leave when he chooses to leave. The genius of the tower isn't its brutality, it's its politeness. It treats imprisonment as hospitality with minor restrictions. It makes captivity feel reasonable, even comfortable, right up until the moment when the prisoner realizes that comfort without choice is just a well-furnished grave. Flambard escapes after 6 months, lowering himself from his window on a rope smuggled inside a wine barrel. His escape becomes legendary not because it was daring, but because it was so obviously improvised. The tower hadn't just imprisoned his body, it had nearly imprisoned his imagination. He escaped by remembering that escaping was possible. The lesson isn't lost on the tower's builders. Future rooms are built with smaller windows, higher floors, and guards who inspect every wine barrel, with the paranoia of men who know that the difference between security and embarrassment is one rope hidden in one barrel, smuggled past one bribed guard. But by 1100, the tower's true function is already expanding beyond simple imprisonment. It's becoming a symbol, a landmark, a psychological anchor point for Norman rule. English travelers approaching London by river see it first, rising from the Thames-side mud like a stone finger pointing toward heaven or hell. The distinction from river level is academic. The tower is designed to be seen. Its white limestone walls are visible from miles away, gleaming in sunlight, ghostly in moonlight, impossible to ignore under any conditions. It's a marketing campaign built from 15,000 tons of stone, broadcasting a simple message to anyone who might be considering rebellion. We are here. We are strong. We are watching. And they are watching. The tower's garrison in 1100 is 40 men, professional soldiers housed in barracks built into the tower's outer walls. They patrol in shifts around the clock, their footsteps echoing off stone corridors that amplify sound like the inside of a drum. The echo is deliberate. It makes the tower feel occupied, active, alert, even when only one guard is walking the halls. The guards carry keys, dozens of keys, each cut for a specific lock, each lock securing a specific room or corridor or gate. The keys hang on iron rings that jangle when the guards walk, another acoustic element in the tower's symphony of control. Prisoners learn to identify guards by the sound of their keys, to tell time by the rhythm of patrols, to measure their own helplessness by the distance between footsteps and freedom. But the most important sound in the early tower isn't keys or footsteps or the echo of stone corridors. It's silence. The silence of thick walls that swallow screams. The silence of rooms where conversations can't be overheard. The silence of a building designed to keep secrets. By 1100, the Tower of London has become England's first purpose-built facility for making inconvenient people disappear without actually killing them. It's an innovation in statecraft that will echo through centuries. The bureaucracy of vanishing. The river keeps flowing. The tower keeps watching. And somewhere in the White Tower's stone maze, a door closes for the second time today. The sound hanging in the cold air like a period at the end of a sentence that no one will ever be allowed to finish reading. In the shadow of the White Tower, the outer walls begin to rise. The year is 1190, and England's new king, Richard the Lionheart, has a problem that can't be solved with crusader swords. He needs money. Lots of money. Crusading is expensive, and the Tower of London, increasingly, is where England's wealth goes to be counted, sorted, and secured. The tower is expanding, not outward into the city, where every square foot costs silver that Richard needs for his Holy Land adventures. Upward and inward, creating a complex of nested courtyards and interlocking defenses that turn the original White Tower into the center of an ever-expanding maze. The new construction follows a principle that medieval military architects call defense in depth. If attackers breach the outer wall, they face a second wall. If they breach the second wall, they face a third. If they breach the third wall, they find themselves in a courtyard surrounded by arrow slits and exposed to crossfire from 3 directions, wishing they'd stayed home. But the architects building Richard's walls aren't thinking about foreign attackers. They're thinking about English crowds. London in 1190 is a city of 50,000 people, and 50,000 people, if they decide to move in the same direction at the same time, become a force that can knock down gates, climb walls, and turn royal fortresses into royal ruins. The solution is the moat. The tower's moat isn't just a ditch filled with water, it's an engineering marvel that redirects the Thames itself, channeling river water through a series of sluices and channels that surround the tower's walls with a 12-foot-deep lagoon. The water is tidal, rising and falling with the Thames, ensuring that the moat is always full but never stagnant. More importantly, the moat is controlled. The sluices can be opened or closed from inside the tower, allowing the garrison to drain sections for maintenance or flood them deeper to discourage swimming. The moat becomes part of the tower's arsenal, a weapon made of water and controlled by men with keys. The cost is staggering. In 1190 currency, the moat construction consumes 4,000 pounds of silver, enough money to buy a fleet of ships or feed a small army for a year. Adjusted for inflation and converted to modern currency, that's roughly $8 million spent on a ditch. But it's a ditch that turns the tower into an island in the heart of London, accessible only by bridges that can be raised in minutes, cutting the fortress off from the city that surrounds it. The psychological effect is immediate. Londoners who once walked past the tower's walls now have to cross water to reach them. The moat transforms a walk into a journey, a casual approach into a deliberate crossing. It forces anyone approaching the tower to stop, look down, and contemplate the gap between themselves and the crown's power. Children who fall into the moat don't always climb out. The water is cold, deep, and contaminated with runoff from the tower's kitchens, stables, and less pleasant facilities. Bodies that go into the moat in winter sometimes aren't found until spring. The tower's clerks keep careful records of construction costs and maintenance expenses, but they don't keep records of drowning victims. Some kinds of accounting, it seems, are better left undone. Inside the expanding walls, the tower's purpose continues to evolve. It's no longer just a prison and fortress. It's becoming a multi-purpose machine for royal authority, housing the crown's treasury, armory, menagerie, and judicial facilities under one fortified roof. The treasury sits in the White Tower's basement, behind 3 sets of doors and 2 sets of guards. England's gold and silver arrive in wooden chests, counted by royal clerks who work by candlelight in rooms without windows. The counting takes days. A single chest might contain 10,000 silver pennies, each coin weighed individually to ensure it hasn't been clipped or filed. The clerks' fingers turn black from handling silver, and their eyes strain from counting by candlelight. But the work continues because the alternative, miscounting the king's money, is a crime punishable by hanging. The armory occupies the White Tower's ground floor, storing weapons for the tower's garrison and the royal army. Swords hang in racks along the walls, their blades oiled against rust. Crossbow bolts sit in wooden boxes, sorted by length and weight. Mail shirts hang from wooden mannequins, like the shed skins of iron knights. The armory is both warehouse and museum, a collection of everything England might need to kill its enemies, organized and catalogued with the efficiency of men who know that a misfiled weapon is a dead soldier. The royal menagerie begins with a single polar bear, a diplomatic gift from Norway, that lives in a cage built into the tower's outer wall. The bear is allowed to fish in the Thames, secured by a long chain that lets it wade into the river but prevents it from swimming to freedom. Londoners gather on the far bank to watch the bear hunt, turning royal imprisonment into public entertainment. It's an early experiment in what will later be called public relations. If you can't make people love the tower, make them curious about what's inside it. By 1200, the tower houses elephants, lions, leopards, and eagles, all gifts from foreign rulers who understand that sending exotic animals is cheaper than sending armies and nearly as effective at demonstrating power. The animals live in cages built by the same craftsmen who build cells for human prisoners, using the same techniques and materials. The line between a royal menagerie and a royal prison, it turns out, is thinner than the bars that separate predators from prey. The expansion creates new problems. More rooms mean more guards. More guards mean more keys. More keys mean more opportunities for keys to be lost, stolen, or copied. The tower's master of keys, a position created in 1195, maintains a ledger recording every key cut, every lock installed, and every guard authorized to carry specific keys. The ledger becomes the tower's most sensitive document, more closely guarded than the crown's gold, because the ledger contains something more valuable than money: the blueprint for the tower's security. The ledger reveals the tower's essential paradox. The building designed to be impregnable is only as strong as the humans who operate it. Guards can be bribed, clerks can be threatened, locksmiths can be turned. The tower's walls are stone, but its security is human. And humans, as any successful prisoner learns, have weaknesses that can be exploited by anyone patient enough to find them. The most successful escape attempt of the period doesn't involve ropes, tools, or violence. It involves conversation. A prisoner named Geoffrey de Mandeville, Earl of Essex, spends 6 months befriending his guards, learning their schedules, their families, their financial problems. He discovers that one guard has a daughter who needs a dowry. Another has debts to London moneylenders. A third drinks too much and gambles poorly. Geoffrey doesn't bribe the guards. He befriends them. He loans them money. He offers advice about their daughters' marriages. He becomes, over the course of 6 months, not a prisoner, but a patron, a source of solutions to problems that have nothing to do with the tower's walls. When Geoffrey walks out of the tower on a foggy morning in March 1197, he doesn't break any locks or climb any walls. He walks out the front gate, wearing a guard's cloak and carrying papers that identify him as a royal messenger. 3 guards see him leave. All 3 recognize him. None of them stop him, because stopping him would mean admitting that they've been accepting favors from a prisoner, and admitting that would mean losing their jobs, their homes, and possibly their lives. Geoffrey reaches Dover and sails to France before anyone realizes that the tower's most dangerous prisoner has been replaced by an empty cell and a carefully forged note explaining that he's been transferred to another facility. The investigation takes 3 months and results in the dismissal of 12 guards, the execution of 2, and the installation of new locks on every door in the tower. The cost of the security upgrade exceeds the cost of the original moat construction. The lesson, recorded in a report that still exists in the tower's archives, is simple. Walls can be climbed, locks can be picked, but a guard who considers a prisoner his friend has already been defeated. The tower's response is to make friendship impossible. New regulations, implemented in 1198, prohibit guards from speaking to prisoners except in the line of duty. Prisoners are forbidden from giving gifts, loans, or advice to tower personnel. Guard shifts are shortened and randomized, preventing guards and prisoners from developing relationships over time. The tower's corridors, once filled with conversation and the natural human tendency to find companionship in shared isolation, become libraries of silence where words are rationed like food in a siege. The policy works. Escape attempts drop to near zero. But the cost is measured in more than silver. The tower becomes not just a prison, but a machine for destroying the human connections that make imprisonment bearable. It succeeds so completely at preventing escape that it begins to prevent hope. By 1200, the Tower of London has evolved into something unprecedented in English history, a building designed to be stronger than the humans who inhabit it. Its walls are thick enough to withstand siege engines. Its moat is deep enough to drown armies. Its locks are complex enough to defeat the finest locksmiths. But its greatest innovation isn't architectural, it's administrative. The tower has become the first facility in England designed to process people like inventory, moving them from cell to cell, guard to guard, record to record, until their humanity dissolves into paperwork and their identities become entries in ledgers that will survive long after their bodies have turned to dust. The Thames flows on, dark and patient, carrying the tower's secrets toward the sea. And in the White Tower's stone chambers, where Norman architects once planned a fortress that would stand for 1,000 years, new plans are being drawn. Plans that have nothing to do with defense against foreign enemies and everything to do with the systematic management of domestic fear. The machine is complete. Now it needs to learn how to feed itself. The year is 1215, and King John has a problem that can't be solved by adding more stones to the tower's walls. 25 English barons have cornered him in a meadow called Runnymede, 15 miles west of London, demanding that he sign a document that will limit royal power for the first time in English history. The document is called Magna Carta, and buried in its 63 clauses is a promise that will haunt the Tower of London for the next 4 centuries. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. John signs because he has no choice. Then he rides back to London, summons his garrison commanders to the tower, and begins planning how to make that promise meaningless. The solution is elegant in its simplicity. If the law requires lawful judgment before imprisonment, then imprisonment becomes a legal process instead of a royal whim. If prisoners must be charged under law, then new laws must be written to ensure that anyone the Crown wants to charge can be charged with something. The tower's role shifts from fortress and treasury to courthouse and legal laboratory. New chambers are carved from the White Tower's thick walls, rooms designed not for comfort or storage, but for the specific requirements of judicial theater. Witness stands positioned where testimony can be heard clearly. Confession desks angled to catch morning light from narrow windows, record-keeping alcoves where clerks can transcribe proceedings without being seen. The transformation requires new personnel. Lawyers arrive at the tower, men trained in canon law and Roman law and the emerging tradition of English common law. They bring books, precedents, and the revolutionary idea that power can be more effectively exercised through legal procedure than through simple force. The lawyers' quarters occupy a new building constructed inside the tower's outer walls, a 3-story stone house with glazed windows and a properly designed library. The contrast with the prisoners' accommodations is deliberate. Justice, the tower's architects seem to suggest, requires better lighting than gilt. But the most important addition to the tower's expanding complex isn't a building, it's a person. The Lieutenant of the Tower, a position created in 1216, serves as the Crown's personal representative within the fortress walls. Unlike the constable who manages military affairs or the warders who handle daily security, the lieutenant answers directly to the king and holds authority over every person and process inside the tower's walls. The lieutenant's commission is written on parchment and sealed with royal wax, but his real authority comes from something more subtle: access. He carries keys to every door in the tower. He can enter any chamber, examine any record, question any prisoner, at any time, for any reason. He is the tower's human interface, the point where royal will translates into individual suffering. The first lieutenant is Geoffrey de Mandeville, son of the Earl of Essex who escaped the tower 20 years earlier. The appointment is John's idea of humor. Who better to prevent escapes than the son of the tower's most successful escapee? Geoffrey brings his father's understanding of the tower's weaknesses and his own appreciation for the value of containment. He implements new protocols that treat prisoners not as individuals, but as inventory items, each assigned a number, a classification, and a projected processing time. High-value prisoners receive what the tower's records call accommodation appropriate to station. This means private rooms, personal servants, access to books and writing materials, and meals prepared in the tower's kitchens rather than whatever scraps the guards might provide. The comfort is calibrated precisely. enough to maintain health and sanity, not enough to enable escape planning. Low-value prisoners receive standard custody, which means shared cells, restricted meal schedules, and no access to writing materials or outside communication. The restriction on writing is particularly effective. A prisoner who can't record his thoughts, can't send letters, can't maintain a diary, begins to lose track not just of time but of identity. Memory, without the reinforcement of written records, becomes unreliable. After 6 months in standard custody, prisoners often can't recall the specific charges that brought them to the tower. The classification system creates a hierarchy of suffering that serves multiple purposes. It incentivizes cooperation by demonstrating the benefits of compliance. It prevents solidarity between prisoners by creating different treatment levels. Most importantly, it gives the lieutenant a tool for managing behavior. Privileges can be granted, restricted, or removed based on a prisoner's willingness to provide information, sign confessions, or implicate associates. The system is tested in 1220 when the tower receives its largest single intake of prisoners. 43 supporters of Louis of France captured after his failed invasion attempt. The prisoners include nobles, knights, clerks, and merchants, representing every level of medieval society. They arrive at the tower expecting to be ransomed or exchanged according to the traditional customs of medieval warfare. Instead, they become subjects in the tower's first systematic experiment in information extraction. The lieutenant separates the prisoners by class and holds them in different sections of the complex. Nobles are housed in the White Tower's upper chambers. Knights are held in the towers built into the outer walls. Clerks and merchants are confined to newly constructed cells in the basement levels. The separation prevents communication and ensures that prisoners can't coordinate their stories or plan joint action. Interrogations begin immediately and follow a precise schedule. Each prisoner is questioned individually, twice daily, at times designed to disrupt sleep patterns and create psychological pressure. Questions focus not on military intelligence, which becomes outdated within weeks, but on networks. Who recruited whom, who provided funding, who offered safe houses, who can be trusted and who cannot. The interrogators are the tower's new lawyers, men trained in the art of legal conversation. They don't use torture, because torture is unreliable and leaves evidence. Instead, they use something more sophisticated: logic. A typical interrogation begins with the presentation of evidence already gathered from other prisoners. The subject is shown documents, signatures, testimonies that seem to prove his guilt. He's invited to correct any inaccuracies, to provide his own perspective, to explain circumstances that might otherwise seem incriminating. The invitation to speak is the trap. Once a prisoner begins talking, begins explaining, begins justifying, he's providing information that can be used to refine questions for the next prisoner. Each interrogation becomes a building block for the next, creating an architecture of information that grows stronger with each confession. The process takes 8 months. When it ends, the lieutenant has extracted enough information to identify and arrest an additional 67 French sympathizers throughout England. More importantly, he's developed a reproducible system for converting captured enemies into intelligence assets. The system's success leads to its expansion. By 1225, the tower houses a permanent staff of interrogators, translators, and records clerks. The lieutenant's office becomes England's first intelligence agency, a clearinghouse for information about domestic threats, foreign conspiracies, and the kind of everyday dissent that, if left unchecked, might grow into rebellion. The clerks work in shifts, maintaining files on thousands of English subjects who have never been arrested, never been charged, never been inside the tower's walls. The files record associations, travel patterns, financial transactions, political opinions expressed in taverns or markets or churches. The information comes from tower alumni, former prisoners who purchased their freedom by agreeing to report on their neighbors. This is the tower's greatest innovation: the conversion of victims into agents. A merchant released after 6 months of standard custody returns to London with a story about harsh conditions and crown brutality. But he also returns with the understanding that his freedom depends on periodic reports about the political reliability of his customers, his suppliers, his family. The reports arrive weekly, written on scraps of parchment and delivered to designated locations throughout London. They're unsigned, undated, and often barely literate, but they provide the tower's intelligence staff with a constant stream of information about the political temperature of the city beyond the walls. The system creates a climate of suspicion that extends the tower's reach far beyond its moat. Londoners learn to moderate their conversations, to avoid controversial topics, to treat every stranger as a potential informant. The tower's physical walls surround 40 acres of London. Its psychological walls surround the entire kingdom, but the system's strength becomes its weakness. By 12:30, the lieutenant's office receives more reports than it can process. The files grow so numerous that clerks can't locate specific records quickly enough to act on urgent intelligence. The volume of information overwhelms the capacity to use information effectively. The solution is categorization. Reports are sorted into immediate threats, potential threats, and background surveillance. Immediate threats receive investigation within days. Potential threats are filed for future reference. Background surveillance disappears into archives where it may never be examined again. The categorization creates gaps where genuine threats can hide. In 1232, a conspiracy to assassinate King Henry III develops undetected because the reports that might have revealed it are filed under potential threats and not examined until after the plot is discovered by accident. The tower's response is typical. More surveillance, more reports, more files, more clerks to manage the expanding archive of English suspicion. The system grows larger rather than more efficient, creating the administrative bureaucracy that will define English government for the next 7 centuries. By 1240, the Tower of London houses more clerks than soldiers. The building, designed as a fortress, has become an office complex. Its stone chambers filled with desks, file cabinets, and the endless scratch of quill pens recording the political reliability of English subjects. The transformation is complete. The tower has evolved from a building designed to imprison bodies into a system designed to imprison minds. Its walls no longer just contain prisoners. They contain the administrative machinery for monitoring, classifying, and controlling the thoughts of an entire kingdom. The Thames continues its ancient flow toward the sea, carrying with it the reflections of torches burning late into the night in the tower's record offices, where clerks work by candlelight to catalog the fears and suspicions of a nation learning to watch itself. And in the White Tower's deepest chambers, where Geoffrey de Mandeville once planned his escape by befriending his guards, new prisoners discover that friendship has become impossible. Conversation has become dangerous, and silence has become the only safe response to the endless questions that echo through stone corridors designed to amplify not just sound, but fear. The machine has learned to replicate itself. And replication, as any student of systems knows, is the difference between a building and an institution. The year is 1348, and death arrives in London aboard Genoese trading ships, carried in the blood of black rats and the breath of dying sailors. The Black Death will kill 1/3 of England's population within 18 months, but inside the Tower of London, a different kind of plague is taking hold, the systematic murder of inconvenient people. The Tower's transformation from prison to execution site begins with architecture, not policy. The original Norman builders never intended to kill prisoners within the Tower's walls. Medieval execution was public theater, performed on hilltops or market squares where crowds could witness royal justice in action. But by 1348, London's growing population makes public executions logistically problematic. Crowds grow too large to control. Sympathetic audiences sometimes attempt rescues. Witnesses ask uncomfortable questions about evidence and guilt. The solution is Tower Hill, a grassy slope immediately north of the tower's walls. The site offers clear sightlines from the city, ensuring that executions remain visible, but it's separated from London's main thoroughfares by the tower's moat, allowing guards to control access and prevent mob interference. More importantly, Tower Hill is royal property. What happens there happens under royal authority, without the messy involvement of local magistrates or civic officials who might demand inconvenient adherence to legal procedure. The first permanent scaffold is erected on Tower Hill in 1349, a wooden platform raised 4 feet above the ground to ensure visibility from a distance. The platform is precisely 12 feet square, large enough to accommodate a prisoner, an executioner, and a priest, but small enough to focus attention on the central action. The mathematics of theatrical death, it turns out, are surprisingly specific. But the scaffold's innovation isn't its size, it's its location. Tower Hill sits exactly 284 yards from the White Tower's main entrance, close enough for condemned prisoners to walk from their cells to their deaths without requiring transport through London streets, but far enough to maintain the illusion that executions are public events rather than internal Tower operations. The walk from the Tower to Tower Hill becomes known as the Last Mile, though it's actually less than 300 yards. Prisoners traverse a path marked by wooden posts driven into the ground at regular intervals, creating a human corridor flanked by guards. The path is straight, with no turns or obstacles, ensuring that condemned prisoners can't delay their journey or attempt escape during the final walk. The psychological design is deliberate. A prisoner walking the last mile can see the scaffold from the moment he leaves the tower's gates. For 300 yards, he contemplates his approaching death, while crowds gather to watch. The walk takes approximately 4 minutes at normal pace, long enough for terror to build, short enough to prevent collapse or rescue attempts. The efficiency appeals to royal administrators who measure success in terms of cost per execution. Tower Hill eliminates the expense of transporting prisoners across London. It reduces security requirements by keeping executions within the Tower's controlled perimeter. Most importantly, it allows the Crown to schedule executions for maximum political impact without coordinating with London's civic authorities. The first execution on Tower Hill takes place on May 18, 1349. The victim is Sir John de Grandson, a knight accused of treason for corresponding with French agents during the ongoing 100 Years' War. His crime is communication, not action, but in the Tower's evolving legal framework, intent has become equivalent to implementation. Groundson's execution establishes the Tower's standard protocol. The condemned man is awakened before dawn and allowed to hear Mass in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, a small church built within the Tower's walls, specifically to serve prisoners facing death. The chapel's location is strategic. Prisoners can receive final sacraments without leaving the Tower's controlled environment. After Mass, Groundson is served a final meal in his cell: bread, wine, and meat, the medieval equivalent of comfort food. The meal serves practical as well as spiritual purposes. A well-fed prisoner is less likely to faint during the execution ceremony, and fainting prisoners create logistical problems for executioners working with edged weapons. At precisely 9 in the morning, Groundson begins his walk to Tower Hill. He's accompanied by a priest, 2 guards, and the Tower's chaplain, who reads aloud from a prayer book during the procession. The reading serves multiple purposes. It provides spiritual comfort for the prisoner, creates a solemn atmosphere for witnesses, and ensures that any final words spoken by the condemned man are drowned out by religious recitation. The crowd assembled on Tower Hill numbers approximately 300 people, a carefully managed audience that includes royal officials, foreign ambassadors, and selected London merchants whose loyalty the Crown wants to reinforce. Attendance is by invitation only, distributed by the Lieutenant of the Tower based on political considerations that have nothing to do with justice and everything to do with messaging. The execution itself takes less than 30 seconds. Groundson kneels beside the chopping block, places his head in the carved depression designed to hold neck steady, and dies when the executioner's axe severs his spine between the 4th and 5th vertebrae. The axe is a specialized tool, heavier and sharper than military weapons, designed specifically for the anatomy of judicial death. But the execution's significance isn't the death itself, it's the precedent. Groundson dies not for anything he did, but for something he wrote. His letters to French contacts contain no military intelligence, no treasonous promises, no evidence of actual betrayal. They're diplomatic correspondence, the kind of communication that aristocrats throughout Europe conduct routinely to maintain international relationships. The Tower's lawyers argue that intent to commit treason is equivalent to treason itself, and that evidence of intent can be inferred from communication patterns rather than proven through specific actions. The legal logic is revolutionary. Thought crimes become capital crimes when the defendant lacks sufficient political protection. The precedent spreads quickly. By 1350, the Tower holds 47 prisoners charged with various forms of communicative treason, writing suspicious letters, speaking carelessly about royal policy, expressing opinions that might encourage French sympathies. The evidence in most cases consists entirely of reported conversations, often gathered by the Tower's network of informal informants. The expansion requires additional space. New cells are carved from the Tower's basement levels, chambers designed for short-term occupancy by prisoners awaiting trial or execution. The cells are smaller than the accommodations provided for long-term prisoners, with lower ceilings, fewer amenities, and no access to natural light. The design reflects a shift in the Tower's penological philosophy. Long-term prisoners require space for exercise, reading, and the basic maintenance of physical and mental health. Short-term prisoners require only enough space to prevent suicide or escape during the brief interval between arrest and execution. The basement cells measure 6 feet by 8 feet, large enough for a straw mattress and a waste bucket, small enough to prevent exercise or pacing. The low ceiling, barely 6 feet high, forces tall prisoners to remain seated or crouched, creating physical discomfort that accelerates psychological breakdown. Prisoners who arrive defiant often become compliant within days, not because of torture or threats, but because of the simple impossibility of standing upright in their assigned space. But the Tower's greatest innovation isn't architectural, it's administrative. The expansion of executions requires systematic record-keeping that tracks prisoners from arrest through death, creating an early version of what modern analysts call a criminal justice pipeline. The lieutenant's office maintains execution schedules planned weeks in advance, coordinating prisoner transfers, scaffold maintenance, and crowd management with the efficiency of medieval event planning. Executions are scheduled for specific days of the week, typically Wednesdays and Saturdays, allowing sufficient time between events for cleanup and preparation. The scheduling creates economies of scale that reduce the cost per execution. Multiple prisoners can be processed on the same day using the same scaffold, the same executioner, and the same crowd control measures. The Tower's account books for 1351 record the cost of a single execution at £4, 6 shillings, but the cost of a triple execution at only £8 total. The efficiency extends to body disposal. Executed prisoners are buried in unmarked graves in the churchyard of St. Peter ad Vincula, located inside the Tower's walls for security and convenience. The graves are shallow, dug by Tower staff using shovels maintained in the same tool shed that stores scaffold maintenance equipment. No headstones mark the graves. No records identify specific burial locations. Bodies disappear into London clay as completely as if they had never existed, leaving only entries in the lieutenant's execution ledger to prove that specific individuals once lived, were charged, were tried, and were killed within the Tower's stone embrace. The anonymity is policy, not accident. The Tower's administrators understand that martyrdom requires memory, and memory requires monuments. Prisoners who disappear into unmarked graves can't inspire future rebellions or become focal points for political opposition. They simply vanish, like smoke dispersing in London's perpetually overcast sky. By 1355, Tower Hill has hosted over 200 executions, making it London's most active execution site and the Tower's most profitable operation. The Crown charges admission fees for premium viewing positions, sells commemorative items bearing royal crests, and accepts donations from merchants who want to demonstrate their loyalty through financial contributions to royal justice. The commercialization transforms execution from judicial procedure into entertainment industry. Vendors sell meat pies and ale to spectators. Musicians perform between executions when multiple prisoners are scheduled for the same day. Children receive special pricing for family attendance, encouraging parents to bring young witnesses to educational demonstrations of royal authority. But the most significant development isn't economic, it's psychological. By 1360, Tower Hill executions have become so routine that they no longer generate significant public interest. Londoners pass by scaffold ceremonies with the same casual attention they give to street vendors or market stalls. Judicial death has become background noise in the symphony of urban life. The normalization represents the Tower's complete victory over English political imagination. The building that began as a fortress designed to intimidate enemies has become a machine for processing domestic dissent so efficiently that dissent itself becomes unthinkable. Citizens who might once have questioned royal authority now limit their political thoughts to approved boundaries. Not because they're physically afraid of the Tower's soldiers, but because they've internalized the Tower's essential message. Resistance is temporary, but bureaucracy is forever. The Thames flows past Tower Hill, carrying the scent of sawdust and the memory of blood, but also carrying the deeper current of a kingdom learning to watch itself with the same pitiless efficiency once reserved for foreign enemies. And in the White Tower's record offices, clerks continue their endless work of cataloging English suspicions, filing reports, and maintaining the archives that will ensure the Tower's influence extends far beyond the reach of any individual axe or any particular execution. The machine has become self-sustaining. And self-sustaining machines, as any student of power knows, eventually become indistinguishable from the societies they were originally built to serve. The year is 1483, and two children are walking up the Tower's stone steps for the last time. Edward V, 12 years old and rightful King of England, climbs beside his younger brother Richard, Duke of York, age 9. They've been told they're moving to better accommodations in the White Tower, while preparations continue for Edward's coronation. The coronation will never happen. Within 3 months, both boys will be dead, and their uncle Richard will be King of England. But their murders will accomplish something more lasting than any political succession. They will transform the Tower of London from a place where people die into a place where people disappear. The boys enter the Tower on May 19, 1483, accompanied by a small retinue of servants and tutors. Their accommodation is the White Tower's royal apartments, rooms originally designed for visiting monarchs, but now serving as England's most luxurious prison cells. The apartments feature glazed windows, tapestries, proper beds, and access to the Tower's library. By medieval standards, it's palatial custody. Their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, visits daily during the first weeks, maintaining the fiction that he's protecting his nephews from political enemies while Parliament determines the legitimacy of their father's marriage. The visits are cordial, even affectionate. Richard brings gifts, books, games, news from court. To observers, he appears to be a devoted uncle caring for his brother's children during a difficult political transition, but the visits serve a more practical purpose: reconnaissance. Each conversation allows Richard to assess the boys' political awareness, their understanding of their situation, their potential to serve as focal points for opposition to his own claim to the throne. The boys, isolated within the Tower's walls, have no independent source of information about the political crisis developing around their succession. The isolation is systematic. The boys' original servants are gradually replaced with men loyal to Richard. Their tutors are dismissed and replaced with clergy who emphasize obedience to lawful authority rather than the rights of kings. Their correspondence is monitored, their visitors are screened, their daily routines are structured to minimize contact with anyone who might provide accurate information about their political situation. By July 1483, the boys are prisoners in everything but name, though they don't yet understand their captivity. Their days follow a careful schedule designed to occupy their minds while limiting their options. Morning prayers, lessons in Latin and mathematics, afternoon exercise in the Tower's inner courtyard, evening meals served in their apartments. The routine creates an illusion of normal court life while ensuring complete control over their environment. The transformation from guests to prisoners is so gradual that the boys don't recognize it until it's complete. One day they're future kings temporarily residing in a royal fortress. The next day, their political obstacles confined in a specialized facility for processing inconvenient people. The transition happens not through dramatic confrontation, but through the slow erosion of choices that defines institutional control. Their last confirmed public appearance occurs on June 16, 1483, when they're seen playing in the Tower's gardens under the supervision of their new guards. Contemporary observers note that both boys appear healthy but subdued, lacking the energy and curiosity that characterized their earlier public appearances. The observation is recorded in several independent sources, suggesting that the boy's condition was noticeable enough to generate comment. After June 16th, the boys become ghosts haunting the Tower's stone corridors. Servants occasionally glimpse them at windows. Guards report sounds from their apartments, conversation, movement, the normal noises of inhabited rooms. But the sightings become less frequent, the sounds more intermittent, until by August 1483, the Tower's staff begins to whisper about apartments that should be occupied but seem strangely quiet. The whispers are dangerous. The Tower's administrators understand that speculation about the prince's fate could generate political instability that might threaten Richard's newly proclaimed kingship. The solution is typically bureaucratic. The boys' staff is reassigned, their apartments are declared closed for renovation, and their existence is removed from official Tower records. The erasure is systematic. Meal orders for the royal apartments are cancelled. Laundry services are terminated. Library books borrowed by the princes are returned to general circulation without notation of their previous readers. The boys disappear from the Tower's administrative systems as completely as if they had never existed. But physical erasure requires physical action. Sometime between August and October 1483, the princes are murdered in their apartments. The method is probably suffocation, the medieval technique of choice for murders that must appear natural. Suffocation leaves no obvious wounds, requires no specialized weapons, and can be performed by men with no particular expertise in killing. The murders are never officially recorded. No contemporary document identifies the killers, describes the method, or explains the disposal of the bodies. The Tower's records for the relevant period contain gaps where entries should appear, blank pages that suggest systematic destruction of evidence rather than casual record-keeping failures. The gaps are themselves significant. Medieval administrators are obsessive record-keepers, documenting everything from meal costs to maintenance expenses with the precision of accountants who know they'll be audited. Blank pages in the Tower's otherwise meticulous records indicate deliberate concealment of specific events that someone wanted erased from history, but erasure creates its own problems. The prince's absence must be explained to courtiers, foreign ambassadors, and political allies who expect to see the boys at public ceremonies. Their continued invisibility becomes evidence of their fate, forcing the Tower's administrators to choose between acknowledging murder and maintaining increasingly implausible explanations for the boys' seclusion. The choice is neither acknowledgment nor explanation. It's silence. The princes simply vanish from royal correspondence, court records, and public ceremonies without official comment or explanation. Their names disappear from documents that should reference them. Their titles are reassigned to other nobles without formal justification. They become non-persons, erased from the present and future as completely as if they had never been born. The technique is revolutionary. Previous royal murders, however politically motivated, were acknowledged as deaths, executions, hunting accidents, battlefield casualties. The princes represent something new in English history: systematic disappearance, the administrative murder of inconvenient people followed by the bureaucratic murder of their memory. The innovation spreads beyond the royal family. Between 1483 and 1485, 17 political prisoners enter the Tower and vanish without recorded explanation. Their names appear in admission records, but not in release documents, execution logs, or death certificates. They disappear into the gap between documentation and reality, the administrative space where the Tower's most sensitive work is performed. The disappearances require infrastructure, secure locations for killing prisoners without witnesses, methods for disposing of bodies without discovery, procedures for modifying records without leaving evidence of modification. The tower develops all three capabilities with the systematic efficiency that characterizes institutional learning. The killing rooms are located in the White Tower's basement, chambers originally designed for storage but converted to serve more specialized purposes. The rooms have stone floors that can be washed clean, walls thick enough to muffle sound, and drainage systems that connect to the tower's waste management infrastructure. They're designed for easy cleanup and minimum residual evidence. Body disposal utilizes the tower's existing systems, the lime kilns used for construction maintenance, the furnaces that heat the complex during winter, the Thames side locations where waste from the tower's kitchens and stables is routinely dumped. Bodies disappear into London's industrial infrastructure as completely as any other form of organic waste. Record modification requires more sophisticated techniques. Entries are physically removed from ledgers using careful blade work that preserves page margins and binding integrity. Missing pages are replaced with blank parchment, aged, using tea stains and smoke exposure to match the appearance of older documents. The modified records pass inspection by anyone who lacks access to independent copies of original documents. The techniques spread throughout England's administrative system as Tower alumni accept positions in other royal facilities. By 1500, systematic disappearance has become a standard tool of English statecraft, employed not just against political prisoners, but against anyone whose continued existence might complicate royal policy. Inconvenient witnesses, embarrassing relatives, foreign agents whose knowledge might prove problematic. The expansion requires training programs that teach the specific skills needed for administrative murder. The tower develops curricula covering the medical aspects of untraceable killing, the engineering requirements for body disposal, and the clerical techniques needed for record modification. The programs are conducted quietly, without formal recognition, but they produce graduates who carry the tower's methods throughout the English government system. By 1509, when Henry VIII assumes the throne, the Tower of London has become more than a fortress, prison, or execution site. It has become a university for the systematic study of making people vanish, a research institution dedicated to the perfection of administrative murder, a laboratory where political problems are solved through the careful application of violence and bureaucracy. The transformation is invisible to contemporary observers. The tower still appears to be a medieval fortress, housing a royal treasury and occasional state prisoners. Tourists still visit to see the royal menagerie and the crown jewels. Foreign ambassadors still attend ceremonial functions in the tower's Great Hall. But beneath the surface pageantry, the tower has become something unprecedented in European history, a facility designed to solve political problems by erasing them, literally and completely, from the historical record. The Thames flows past the tower, carrying the reflections of torches burning late in the record offices, where clerks work through the night to ensure that tomorrow's history contains no trace of today's inconvenient truths. And in the White Tower's basement chambers, where two princes once played games and studied Latin grammar, new techniques are being developed for the conversion of living political problems into empty rooms and blank pages in carefully maintained ledgers that will never be audited by anyone with the authority to ask uncomfortable questions about the gaps where England's most dangerous secrets used to be recorded. The machine has learned its most important lesson. The perfect crime isn't undetectable. It's unmemorable.